Hello, everyone. Today we are talking about Iraq and Iran, two pretty um, important and interesting places in the Middle East that I'm sure you guys have heard a fair amount about. We're going to start with Iraq. So, a few quick facts about Iraq: the capital is Baghdad. Um, the area it's a bit larger than California, and it has a population of about 38 million. They use the dinar and they speak Arabic and Kurdish. So 75% of their population is Arab, 10% is Kurd, and 15% is other. Something that you should probably be aware of in this area is that there are kind of three, sort of, maybe four main people groups in this area. You have the Arabs, you have the Persians, the Kurds, and then sort of the Christian, Jewish, other section of people. Brief history about Iraq. So they were originally part of the Ottoman Empire. You can see it in green there. And then after the Ottoman Empire fell, the British came in and they set up a monarchy. And this was during World War One. And obviously, everything usually goes super well when European powers jump into other nations and try to figure out, how to make European government work for them. That was sarcastic. It doesn't usually go very well. And so after, the monarchy, there was a war, a coup, a revolution, a few more coups, and basically that power vacuum made way for this guy. Saddam Hussein was originally backed by the US because he was fighting against Iran after the Islamic Revolution. And the US saw that as a good thing, and they were totally behind this guy, which is not usually how we think of him today. Because what happened is that Saddam ended up attacking his own people and trying to invade Kuwait, which is one of the neighboring countries. He also tried this chemical attack on the Kurds. And after that, the USA was like, no, you cannot do that. We're going to impose sanctions on you. We're not going to be your friend anymore. Saddam just ignored that. And so then the USA attacked the Saddam regime. In 2003, the US and some allies came into Iraq in the name of sort of taking away Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, which, if Iraq had had weapons of mass destruction, that would have been in violation of the UN resolution against that. However, there were none, and there's also been some question about whether or not they ever did have weapons of mass destruction. There's still some speculation about that. Regardless, Saddam Hussein was killed on December 30. Wow, on December 30, 2006. And then the troops left about 5 years after that. Another thing, when we think of the Middle East, we often talk about 9/11 and Al Qaeda, which is different than the regime Saddam Hussein was a part of, but they both have a connection to Iraq. So we're going to talk about Osama bin Laden too. So Osama bin Laden is actually a citizen of Saudi Arabia, and he was the founder of the Islamic extremist organization Al Qaeda. So 19 members of Al Qaeda were responsible for the 9/11 hijackings in 2001. But his connection to Iraq is that Al Qaeda had a training camp in Iraq. And a group from that training camp, they were the people who split off and formed ISIS. So in the power vacuum left after the US troops, destroyed Saddam Hussein, withdrew, you also have the Arab Spring happening, which is attacking, people in authority. That created this huge power vacuum for ISIS to really take a hold of Iraq. Some geography, since we talked about all of the sad stuff, we're going to just get into some simple things now. So the Fertile Crescent, this is a historically very important area of the world. The Fertile Crescent, now called the Alluvial Plains, is this area between the Tigris and Euphrates River. So the Tigris and the Euphrates, super important. They're in a desert area, so water is big. And 75% of the population of Iraq actually lives between these two rivers because it is a much more fertile area to live in. You might recognize a few of the names of places on the map. The Mosul Dam has seen some intense violence over the past couple of years, but we're just talking about geography right now. Um, Also, oil industry. Iraq has the third largest oil reserve in the Middle East. The first largest is what? Saudi Arabia. Oil is their largest, kind of their only major export. Oil is a big deal down there, and we're also going to talk about Iran's relationship with oil. So, the people of Iraq. Cities and people groups, they're kind of divided up into, you have the Sunni Kurd, the Sunni Arab, Shia Arab, all of these people. Obviously, as you get closer, there's this section down over on the border to Iran, which is where you get more of a Shia population, which makes sense because Iran is primarily Shia. Along with Iran, Iraq is one of the only two countries in the world with a majority Shia population. Iraq is a little bit more split between Shia and Sunni, but Iran is, there's barely any Sunnis there. Also, something important to note about Iraq is it has a higher Kurdish population. We learned a little bit about the Kurds on the first day that we studied the Middle East when we talked about, what happened after the US troops left Syria, what happened to the Kurds there. So historically, the US and the UK and other Western countries have had a really good relationship with the Kurds, but it is possible that due to the actions of the United States that might undergo some changes in the near future. Iraq is also closely linked to the Syrian people, not necessarily the Syrian government, but socially they do tend to get along pretty well. A few fun facts about Iraq. The first writing system, cuneiform, was found in Iraq. Also, Iraq is a very popular tourist destination, or at least it used to be before all of the terrorism and ISIS and things like that. They're known for loving to dance, and also Zaha Hadid she's one of the most accomplished female architects in the world. Down below, you see a picture of a building that she designed, and she is from Iraq. One more slightly, it's a very odd fun fact. I think it's worth knowing. So there is a 600-page Quran written entirely with the blood of Saddam Hussein. Now, before you go on and think that this is some super weird thing that someone found his body and drained it of blood and wrote the Quran, that's not what happened. He actually requested that this be made. So that's why it's here. It's a big problem, however, because in Islam, it is a sin to write any part of the Quran in blood. But it's also a sin to destroy the Quran. So, yeah, it's here. You have to get special permission to see it, but it exists, and now you know. All right, Iran, here we go. Fun facts, quick facts about Iran. The capital is Tehran. It is a little bit smaller than Alaska. It has 81 million people, which makes it the second most populated country in the Middle East. The most populated being Egypt, which is also kind of that Middle East, Africa border country. They use the Iranian rial. They speak Persian or Farsi, but they also speak a lot of other languages. Ethnicities, they are majority Persian, 16% Azeri, those are people from Azerbaijan, and 10% Kurdish. They also have the highest number of Shia Muslims in the world. All right, geography. So if you'll notice right here, before we get into, the things where I tell you what all of these mountains are called, I want you to notice just how mountainous Iran is. You can see the surrounding areas are not. And there's a few reasons for this. One of those is that I'll talk about the earthquakes in a second. Physical geography. So the Zagros Mountains are to the west. The Alborz Mountains are in the north. They also have the tallest volcano in Asia. And one of the reasons that Iran has, lasted so long and is as large as it is because these mountain ranges form natural borders against anyone who's trying to invade Iran. So back to the mountains, they are on the border between the Eurasian and Arabian tectonic plates. It goes right through Iran right here. And because of this, they get a lot of earthquakes, which also then, formation of mountains, volcanoes, things like that. So as of yesterday, they had 154 earthquakes in the past year and 7 in the past 30 days. So they get a lot of earthquakes, some of them small, but some of them pretty devastating. Oil and industry, also important in Iran. It is the second largest producer of oil. So in order, you have Saudi Arabia is the first largest producer of oil. Then you have Iran as the second most, and Iraq as the third largest producer of oil in the world. But they also have pretty abundant other natural resources because of their geographic isolation. And they are decently self-sufficient because of that. The people of Iran. So if you remember back to that first day we talked about the Middle East, Iran is not part of the Arab League because Persians are not Arabs. This goes back to that idea of Arabs tend to be Sunni Muslims, Persians tend to be Shia or some other religion. But they are sort of their own Islamic republic. Their political leader is also the leader of the Shia faith. So it would be super weird if they were part of the Arab League, because then you would have the leader of the Shias submitting to this Sunni authority. Anyways, other interesting thing about the people of Iran and religion is that you'll notice these pictures of Iranian women and their head coverings tend to be looser. They are starting to be a little bit more flexible with, sort of this idea of stringently following certain rules, whereas other parts of the Middle East, you still see women in a full head covering. It's starting to become more socially acceptable to be a little bit more lax with that in Iran. All right, other important things about religion. So while the majority of Iran is Shia Muslim, there are other pockets of Jews and Christians. So outside religions are monitored by the government and they are not allowed to build churches, but they are still allowed to exist. And so because of that, Iran actually has one of the fastest growing underground Christian churches in the world. And also the Iranian Jews claim to be descendants of Queen Esther. So you have a very strong Jewish and Christian population in Iran, which also has a very strong Muslim population. A few fun facts about Iran. So Iran has had over 30 different capitals during their history, which is more than any other country in the world. The current capital is Tehran, but they've also had, like I said, 30 different ones. Alcohol is technically banned in Iran. However, there is a decent amount of bootleg stuff and smuggling. And it's kind of like one of those things where it's illegal, but if you just don't talk about it, no one cares, which is just fascinating socially. They are the largest producer of caviar in the world, for those of you into fine dining. Their celebration of Persian New Year is known throughout the world. All languages other than Persian are banned in schools. So you might remember, when we talked about the USSR and how, they banned Ukrainian from being taught. The idea behind this is a little bit less sinister. They're just trying to sort of create a sense of unity between all of the different people groups and things like that they have going on in their country. So it's kind of an interesting way to create unity, but that's the idea. Another super interesting thing about Iran is that they are one of the few countries in the world with somewhat functional ties to North Korea. So if you're interested in that, you can look up more on that. Otherwise, that is all I have for you guys today. I hope you have a great rest of your day and have enjoyed learning about the Middle East.